All right, we're going to start with the 6-inch circular tutorial portion first. And I'm just going to be knitting 3 rows of ribbing before I put them onto the larger circular needles. The first thing you want to do, you want to make sure that your stitches are not twisted. So you want to make sure they're lined up all the way around so that your sock doesn't have a twist in it. And once you've made sure of that, you're going to begin knitting in the round. This is a 1x1 ribbing, which means it's 1 knit, 1 purl. So right now they're not joined in a circle, but as soon as I do this first stitch, they will be. So I want to make sure this stitch is snug, not real tight, but snug. So there is my first knit stitch. And like I said, I'm going to pull it so it's nice and snug. And then I'm going to purl and knit and purl and knit. And I'm going to do this all the way around until I've completed 3 rows of ribbing. Now, just like the example with the 6-inch circulars, we're going to do the exact same thing with the double pointed needles. Again, you're going to make sure your stitches are not twisted. Your cast on stitches are evenly dispersed among the 4 needles. And then you're going to take the 5th needle, and this is going to begin your circles. You can see right here they are not joined. So this first stitch is a knit stitch. I put it on the empty needle. Again, you want to make sure nothing is twisted. You're going to knit the first stitch and then purl. And knit. And purl. The double pointed needles are a little bit more fiddly than the small circulars are. However, I do tend to have a tighter tension when I use double pointed needles. And I am going to go all the way across on this one so you can see how you go from one needle to the next. I'm on my last stitch of this needle. So the needle that was empty now has some stitches on it, and the one I was knitting off of is now the empty needle. So it now moves on to the next needle. And you want to make sure that you maintain stitch pattern. So I ended with a knit stitch. So this first stitch is going to be a purl. And likewise, I'm going to go around this 3 times. So I have 3 rows of ribbing before I transfer them onto the larger circular needles. I now have the beginning cuffs done, and I'm going to get ready to transfer them onto the needle with the larger, longer cable. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to slide all of the cuffs from the first sock onto this needle, and then we'll divide them. And when you transfer these onto the other set of needles, you do want to make sure that you put the stitches on correctly and that you don't twist them. Now when you look at a knitting stitch where it loops over top of the cable, it forms a front and a back section that loop over top of the cable. These are like legs. You want to make sure that the one on the right is facing front. The one to the left should be in the back. So as you slide the stitches on, you do want to make sure that that stays in that order. And you are just going to begin sliding the stitches onto the new needle. The very last stitch that you slide on should be the stitch with the active yarn on it. That would be your last stitch. Now it looks a little bunched up here, but what you're going to do is fold your cable in half with your active yarn behind you. Count the number of stitches you have. In my case, it's 56, and you're going to divide that by 2. So it's going to be 28. You're going to split these between the front and the back of this loop. So you're going to find that center section. So right here is my 28th stitch, and I've got it divided. I'm going to then pull this cable. This is the end part of the loop. I'm just going to pull it a little bit so it doesn't slide out. And this is my first sock on the needles with the live yarn in the back. So there's the first sock. The second sock is a little trickier to put on than this. Here's my second sock that I'm going to be putting onto the other set of needles. Now once again, I am going to find my active live yarn, which is right here. This will go into the back. Now this is a set of double pointed needles because I did want to show you both methods with the 6-inch needles as well as double pointed. In this case, I'm going to count out the 28 stitches. In my case, I have the 28 stitches on each of the front and the back needles. So I'm going to count those out, starting with the one from the back here. I'm going to use the needle here that is the back. I'm going to be threading the stitches onto the needle that is in the back with the live yarn. So I'm going to take this back needle and I'm just going to slide these stitches. Now I have 28 stitches from my live section here across this needle and to this needle here of my double pointed. I'm going to slide all of these stitches onto the back needle here. I now have back section on. Here is that active live yarn, and it is on the back needle. These two front needles, again, you want to make sure your work doesn't twist as you're putting them on, and you're going to use the needle that is facing in the front, and you're going to slide these stitches on, again making sure you don't twist your work as you go. All right, let's look at what we've got now. We have both socks on the needles. The back needle here has the working yarn coming off of the last stitch on the right hand side for both socks, and we have this large loop at the end. I stick my finger around this loop so that when I pull, I do not pull this all the way through the sock. We're now ready to actually start the knitting of the 2 socks at once. You're going to take that yarn, you're going to take the needle that is in the back with the live yarn, and you're going to pull that needle, again holding onto this cable so you don't pull it too far. I'll show you what I do. I pull it. So you now have a short amount of needle in the front, but your back needle has the majority of the cable. You're going to knit across the first sock on the front needles, and you want to stay in pattern. In this case, I'm still doing ribbing, but depending on what pattern you're making, I'm going to knit across. Make sure this first stitch is snug so you don't have a ladder. So I'm doing knit, purl, knit, purl. It's 1 by 1 ribbing. I'm now doing my last stitch on the front of the first sock. There it is. Now I'm going to drop this live yarn and I'm going to move to the other sock. I'm going to slide the needle, I'm going to slide the stitches forward, and I'm going to knit across this section. Again, you want to pull the yarn that you've just finished with, you want to pull that needle through, but not all the way through. You want to make sure that loop doesn't disappear. So again, I just put my finger in there so I don't pull it too far. And I'm going to go across the front stitches on this side. I'm now doing the last stitch on the second sock in the front. And there we go. And you can see I have my longer cord hanging in the back to the right side now. This is the stitch I've just finished, and here's my working yarn. So I have knit across the front of both socks, and in the front is the working yarn on both socks. I'm now going to turn my work. And if you look at the needles, the long cord is now in the front and the short portion is in the back. You want to make sure you hold your finger once again in this loop so it doesn't pull through. And you're going to pull the needle in the back so that it gets long and the needle in the front becomes short. Your live yarn for both socks is now in the back. Here it is. Your front needle is short. Your back needle is long to allow you to loop around. And you're now going to do the same thing over that we just did, knitting across the back this time. And you're going to repeat these two methods until you reach your heel portion of the sock. And this is where we're going to stop this week. Make sure you tune in next Wednesday when I will show you how to do the heels on the 2 at a time sock method. So thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up. And don't forget we have a regular Saturday podcast as well as Wednesday tutorials. Thanks again for watching.